Hello, my name is Allison Forrest. I'm a senior at the University of Houston, Victoria. I go to their Katy campus. I will be graduating in the fall of 2021 with my bachelor's in computer science and mathematics. Right now I'm in an operations research class, and today I'm going to be going over queuing theory. And just for reference, this is in chapter 17 of our textbook, if you'd like to follow along or if you'd like to reference later definitions. All right, so let's go over the basics of queuing theory. These pictures are pulled directly from the textbook if you'd like to see them later, but I'm going to walk you through quickly just the basic queuing system, and then we're going to go over definitions. All right, so in the top picture, you can see the basic queuing system. We're going to start on the left with the input source. So this is basically a population where you're pulling customers from, which is people being served. And they enter the queuing system starting with the queue, which is where they're held to wait in line. And then when they're done waiting in line, they're called to be served in the service mechanism. And then once they're served, they're considered served customers and they leave the system, and we technically don't care about them anymore. So a little bit more in depth, you can see in the bottom picture where the customer comes in. You can see the queue again, and we have multiple people in the queue, but they're one-to-one in the queue. And then we have multiple people waiting to be served at the same time. So we have multiple people first in line at the front of the queue. And that's because you can see inside the service mechanism, there are multiple servers waiting to serve customers. So as an example, this would be like in a hospital, would be a single service mechanism. And then the different servers would be different doctors waiting to help multiple customers at the same time. And then you can see again, as customers are served, they completely leave the system and we don't account for them anymore. So we're just going to go over some definitions real fast, just to clear things up. So beginning with our input source, this is where we receive our customers from. So it contains the calling population. And the calling population is basically the total amount of people that we can bring into the system. So this can be of infinite size or finite in size. And then another thing to note about the input source and calling population is that there's something called an inter-arrival time. And this is just the time that occurs between each customer, each consecutive customer. So from the time that one person arrives to the time that the next consecutive person arrives, that's going to be the inter-arrival time. All right, and next we have the customer, and that's just going to be the person who is being served. And in many cases, it doesn't even have to be a person. It is a person in the case of a hospital, where it is people waiting to be seen by a doctor. But for, say, like in the case of a traffic light, it's cars waiting to be served by the traffic light, being told when to stop and go. So it doesn't have to be a person, technically. Next, we have the queue. And the queue is going to be the beginning of the queuing system. And it's going to be where customers are held before they're served in the service mechanism. So it can be infinite or finite in size. So let's say you're at a hospital. They're not going to turn people away based on the queue size. So that would be an infinite line that could go on, though you won't usually see that. Or the queue could be finite. That could cut off people, telling them to go somewhere else for service if the queue gets too long. So it can be infinite or finite. Another thing to note is the queue discipline. So this determines the order at which customers are selected for service. At places like a gas station, customers will be first come, first serve, kind of first in, first out kind of mechanism going. And in places like a hospital, it may be different, where like an emergency room, where the order is determined by the need for service. All right. Next is going to be the service mechanism itself. So it contains two things of note, facilities and servers. So facilities are going to be the number of service mechanisms, and then servers are going to be the number of parallel available services for customers. So for instance, at a hospital, the facilities would be the number of hospitals in the area, and the number of servers would be the number of doctors in a single hospital that are available to take customers. Now, a service time is going to be the total time that a customer is served inside the service mechanism. It's important to note that it does not include the time that the customer waits inside the queue. And finally, we have the served customer, who is discharged from the service mechanism, and they're going to leave the system, and we're not going to account for them anymore in our model. All right, so we're going to walk through an example real fast, and it's going to be a gas station. All right, so our input source is people with cars, and our calling population is going to be people with cars who are low on gas or in need of gas. And that's going to be all the possible people low on gas that could possibly come to the gas station. All right, and the customer, the person who's going to be waiting for a gas pump, is going to be, as I said, someone who needs gas. The queue is going to be the line of people waiting for a pump. And this line is going to be first come, first served. You don't cut in line at a gas station, and your need for gas does not determine when you're served. It is only your arrival time. And then, of course, this line can technically be infinite. The gas station is not going to turn away people based on how long the line is, though people may leave depending on how long the line is, but we don't account for that. So technically, the line can be infinite here. And the service mechanism itself is going to be the gas station. So the facilities are going to be gas stations in the area. The servers are going to be the gas pumps at a gas station. And the service time is going to be the time it takes to pump gas. And again, this does not include the time it takes to wait in line to pump gas, just the time to pump gas. All right, so now we're going to go into queuing system classes. And these classes are not all enveloping. They don't cover all the examples that we could possibly have, but they do cover most of the examples that you will see. So these 4 classes, these are the 4 classes we're going to cover. So our first one is going to be commercial service systems. And these are systems where outside customers come in to receive a service from a commercial organization where they are not internal to the organization. So typically you're going to see examples in retail services or things like a barber shop or a grocery line or a gas station like we just talked about. Our next example is going to be transportation service systems. So this is where vehicles are either the customer or the server. So in our examples like a traffic light, the vehicle, your car, is the customer waiting to be served by the traffic light. In instances of a taxi, the taxi car is the server who is serving a person. In the case of an elevator, the elevator is also the server, serving either a person or an item. So our next class is going to be internal service systems, and this is a little different from commercial services because the customers are internal to the organization that is serving them. So this would be like maintenance, like custodial work, or internal maintenance work required IT work, inspectors, or in a laboratory that provides functions for a hospital. And finally, we have social service systems, and these are just going to be queues that are created by social services, such as those in the judicial system, the legislative system, or even in the healthcare system. All right, so now we're going to talk about labeling a queue, and there's a pretty standard way to label a queue so that it's very widely understood, and it's going to look like this. You're going to have one letter / another letter / a final letter. And the first letter A is going to represent the distribution of inter-arrival times. And again, inter-arrival times are going to be the times between consecutive customers' arrival. The second letter is going to be the distribution of service times. And again, service times is the time total it takes to be served, and again, does not include the time spent waiting in a queue. And finally, the last letter is going to represent the number of servers in a service system or a service mechanism. All right, so here's some pretty common, I know my face cuts it off, but these are some pretty common distributions that we're going to see. These letters M, D, E, K, and G would be placed in place of A, B, and C. So M would represent exponential distribution, D would represent degenerate distribution, EK would represent Erlang distribution, and G would represent general distribution. You might be familiar with some of these, having taken statistics. They're also covered in chapter 17 of the book if you'd like to take a look at that as well. So that's just the basics of queuing theory. And again, it is in chapter 17 of the book if you'd like to reference it or take a closer look at it than what I covered. So thank you for watching.